in my opinion, is the best goalkeeper in this league. James Trafford will definitely be a Premier League goalkeeper next season, and he will definitely be England's number one for the foreseeable future as soon as he overtakes Pickford. Pickford's on his way down, I think, now. And that's no disrespect to Pickford. It's just an age thing. I think Trafford will overtake him, and he will be the England number one for just as long as Jordan Pickford has been.
Hello guys, welcome back to The Sportsman Untitled. We've got a remote episode for you today. I'm joined as always by Gab Sutton, and our special guest for today is Joe from Turfcast. So we've got a deep dive on Burnley to look forward to later in the show. But first, we're going to review the weekend's action as always. Gab, we should probably start with Preston in the FA Cup, I think. The only championship team left standing, and a fantastic victory to take them into the quarterfinals, right?
Yeah, great result for them. Looking forward, it could be a really exciting opportunity for Preston North End to make something of their season, which looks like there's not been much of a mid-table in the Championship, has there? But I think Preston North End are kind of one of those teams who have been around there. And I'm really impressed with the work Paul Heckingbottom has done just to stabilise things. Haven't always had an easy time of things on the road, but on the whole, I think he's done a really good job, and they've just steadily climbed the table, really. And I think as well, just he seems to be a very good person in terms of man management to come in. Off the back of Ryan Lowe, he seems to be a good person generally as an in-season appointment. He replaced Lee Johnson at Barnsley in the 15-16 season. He replaced Slavica Kanovic early on in Sheffield United's 21-22 campaign, and again he has replaced Ryan Lowe this season, and each time he seems to do a good job and make an instant impact. So a very reliable manager at Championship level, getting the best out of the likes of Mads Frokjær Jensen and Stefan Thordarson. So yeah, great work from Paul Heckingbottom.
And Joe, I mean, you saw the other side of that result, didn't you? What was it like from a Burnley perspective? And can you give any praise to Preston and Paul Heckingbottom at this moment?
Well, yeah, Preston were fantastic on the day. They just wanted it more than us. I think that was the thing. I think Gab hit the nail on the head there, where that run is basically their season at the minute. There's nothing else for them to play for, and that's not me making excuses. I do think the FA Cup just meant more to them. We did make 9 changes. I think they had a few players out as well, to be fair, but they just wanted it more. And on the day, they were miles better than us in every single area of the pitch. They overran the midfield. I thought John Joe Shelby looked very lethargic and looked like he didn't particularly want to be there. But yeah, from a Burnley perspective, it was awful, and I'm gutted you had to start the show that way.
We have to start somewhere, Gab. They've got Villa in the next round, Preston at Deepdale. What are the chances of a shock do you reckon for that one?
Well, you never know. A couple of years ago, Aston Villa under Unai Emery lost to Stevenage, who were in League Two at the time. So, and that was at Villa Park. So there's still the possibility that Preston North End might be able to cause a shock if the likes of Frokjær Jensen, who I love with the balletic qualities that he brings, and the creativity in sort of attacking midfield, and Thordarson, who's a real unit as well. So I think those two could be very dangerous for Preston North End. Obviously, you'd have to make Aston Villa favourites, but they've been competing on multiple fronts this season as well. So you never know, that could be a bit of a banana skin for Villa.
We will come on to it later on as well, Joe, in a bit more detail about Burnley. But as you mentioned, it does feel like FA Cup was a bit secondary. Is there any part of you that's kind of glad you're out?
I am now. I'll be honest with you, I did kind of want a bit of a run. It's weird because even though I understand the league is more important and the league is the bread and butter, when you get to the 5th round and, you've got a chance to get to the quarterfinal, you're playing against another championship team. And then you're starting to think, well, now maybe let's start taking it seriously. We did exactly the same a few years ago when we got Lincoln City in the 5th round. That was just as infuriating as what yesterday was. But yeah, to lose in the manner we did, I think is the most annoying thing for Burnley. To lose against local rivals, admittedly not the main rivals, but still, there's no love lost between Burnley and Preston, especially with everything that went on in the league game with Osmajic and Hannibal. We really wanted to beat them, I'm not going to lie. And it was infuriating to see us put the performance in we put in. But on the flip side of it, full concentration now on the league. The priority is catching Sheffield United or maybe even Leeds, probably just Sheffield United to be fair. But we've got to get into that top 2, and that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Let's turn our attention to a few of the other championship games as well. Gab, I think we should probably start at the bottom. Well, it was the bottom. It's not anymore. Luton Town, massive 1-0 win against Portsmouth. We discussed them a little bit on last week's show, but really important for Matt Bloomfield, I think, to kind of get up and running and an important home win as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The big thing for me was, number one, you got somebody like Jordan Clark, who was outstanding from what I could see with his ball-carrying ability. This is somebody who started in the Championship in their promotion season a couple of years ago, and if they can get him in form, that could be huge for them. And then you've got somebody like Christ Makosa, who came in January and looks pretty solid on the right of that back three and won sort of man of the match accolade from some. So a couple of positive bits in there for Luton Town. I think their home performances in terms of the last two, because you look at the performance against Sheffield United as well in their last outing at Kenilworth Road, it does give Matt Bloomfield some encouragement. If they can go to Burnley and get a result of some kind, it gives themselves a little bit of momentum and belief that they can beat the drop. So yeah, that victory over Portsmouth was all important for the Hatters. No getting around it.
Burnley seem to be coming up regularly when we're talking about other teams, don't they, Joe, at the minute? I mean, Luton have had a bizarre season so far, a terrible season so far, it has to be said, but they kind of still carry a threat, don't they?
Yeah, they do. It's going to be a tough one for us. We're at that stage of the season now where you're playing teams 9 times out of 10 that have something to play for. There's very few teams that won't have much to play for now, and Luton are one of them teams, and they're going to be fighting for their lives. So we need to be at our game on Saturday when we play them. But yeah, fingers crossed we can get that one over the line. We tend to struggle against these teams, but just get over the line. Like Oxford recently, a 1-0 home win. I'm probably expecting it'll be something similar.
And Derby now at the foot of the table, Gab. A 1-0 loss to Borough. And we should also mention Borough as well, because that's 2 wins now back to back, putting themselves kind of in the playoff picture after we spoke about all that pressure Michael Carrick was under. Let's start with Borough then. Have they still got a chance of the top 6? It feels like momentum could have swung.
Yeah, absolutely, because they had that losing streak, didn't they, that sort of looked like it was going to plunge them into mid-table, but those back-to-back wins combined with drop points for the likes of Blackburn recently and West Brom as well, it's just given themselves a bit of a sniff, and they'll almost feel that a missed opportunity that, you know, if they'd just found mid-table form during that barren sort of losing streak, you know, they'd be comfortably in the top 6 by now. Instead, they're still on the outside of it, but they've got a bit of a shot now. I think Finn Azaz is going to be crucial to their hopes. I think he's been one of the most exciting players in the Championship at times this season. And if he can find form in the remainder along with Hayden Hackney, then that's going to be absolutely massive for Middlesbrough.
I know for a few games, Carrick was trying Iheanacho and Conway, I think, up front together, and I'm not sure that quite worked as a duo. But bringing Azaz back in seems to have cured a few of those ailments. So we'll have to see how they get on. We should also talk about Derby County, though, bottom of the league now. Close defeat here. It just feels like a big ask for Eustace to keep them up. Gab.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think they've got to win against Blackburn this weekend. A little bit like what we've spoken about with Luton against Portsmouth. Derby County have to win. I think they could go 7 points adrift if they lose that game. So it shows, and I think at this stage of the season, 7 points is not impossible, but that would be a big ask. So absolutely crucial to keep themselves within touching distance of safety. Again, I mean, I think there have been Eustace's first game, you know, they looked all over the place defensively. And since then, it's been 1-0 defeats to Millwall and to Middlesbrough, you know, decent sides. And on another day, they might have finished a 0-0, and they would have had some solid foundations to move forward with. But with those just narrow 1-0 defeats, it's a big blow for Derby. It does feel a little bit like momentum's away from them right now. I still back Eustace to make an impact and drill this team into shape, because I think he is somebody who can make a quick impact on teams because of his pragmatism and adaptability. But this is going to be a real test of his mettle.
I agree with that completely. Joe, how do you see kind of the relegation picture right now? What are your feelings for the bottom 3? I know it's not usually the end of the table you're looking at, luckily enough.
Yeah, it's a bizarre one because I had Cardiff as relegation certainties not that long ago, but obviously they got a big win against Hull recently. So now I'm not really sure that you know the momentum seems to be swinging back in their favour. I know you've already touched on on Derby, but I think looking at that, I don't think they have enough to beat Blackburn. As much as I'd like to see Derby beat Blackburn, I don't think they have enough. So I think it's going to be pretty much the end of the road's probably, to say I'm saying that on the 3rd of March is a little bit premature mainly, but you just struggle to see where they're going to pick these wins up. But I do agree with both of what you say. I think Eustace is a good manager. I was happy to see him leave Blackburn, and I do think eventually, if he had more time, he might be able to get Derby out of it. But I just think time might be running out for Derby County at the minute. And I still think Luton will go as well. I know they had a big win, but we'll see how they get on in the next couple of games. But I'm not too sure on that final spot. Maybe Plymouth now, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to find out. They gave a good showing for themselves also, we have to say, against Manchester City in the FA Cup. And I'm always happy to talk about Coventry, Gab. Another win, 8 out of 9 now for Frank Lampard, up to 5th in the table. It's just second half of the season Coventry at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big one is the performance of Sakamoto at the weekend. I think he was the man of the match for most people with the vibrant creativity that he's brought from sort of wide areas in that 3-4-2-1 that Lampard has played recently. And I'm just really excited. I think Matt Grimes has made an enormous difference since coming in from Swansea. I think that's starting to look like one of the signings of the January window, isn't it? Just with that class and assurance that he brings to the base midfield, and he's helped them create chances in different ways. So yeah, Coventry have been banging form, and they're looking like a real threat for the top 6. I mean, I'd love to know, Simon, how you're feeling as a Coventry fan. Do you feel like you're going to get in there?
Yeah, I do. It's insane to say after a couple of months ago, but I mean, 8 wins out of 9 kind of changes the picture completely, and the amount of kind of chances we're creating and looking really strong going forward. Had you right, got some minutes off the bench against Oxford as well. Mason Clark's in form. I think if you're looking at where we are now and the situation we're in, I'd say we probably should finish in the playoffs, which is a bit dangerous to say, but the impact Lampard's had, we're winning. I think our last 4 games have been wins by 1 goal, kind of changing the mentality. The momentum's been brilliant. Radoni's injury is a concern. He went off with, looked like a dislocated shoulder, so he could be out, and he's been fantastic. An interesting point to make on us is that we've scored 17 headed goals now in the Championship, and the next highest, I think, is 9. So it's almost double the nearest highest team. So it kind of speaks of how Lampard's getting us playing in terms of crossing the ball into the box and getting men on the end of it. So really positive from a Coventry point of view. Joe, let's get your view on Lampard and Coventry as well, the impact he's made.
Yeah, he's done very, very well. And I was looking at our remaining fixtures for the rest of the season. Burnley have still got to go to Coventry, and I was thinking, well, that's the most difficult fixture that we've got for the rest of the season, and that includes Sheffield United. I'm very, very wary of Coventry at the minute. I don't think they'll catch like the top 3 or the top 4 or anything like that, but it's looking like potentially, I know we'll get into it, that Burnley could be in the playoffs. And as much as I do rate Sunderland as well, I feel like Coventry could be a massive threat to whoever's in that playoff. So yeah, Frank Lampard's had a brilliant impact. He's done very, very well. The proof's in the pudding. And it's interesting as well because he's obviously gone to Coventry to try and rebuild his reputation, which did take a bit of a hit through his previous jobs. And he's done absolutely fantastic. And he was linked with Burnley when we were trying to replace Vincent Kompany before Scott Parker came in. And interestingly, a lot of Burnley fans immediately like, no, don't want Lampard, don't want him, he's not good enough. And he's come in, and I think he's proven that he would have been good enough for Burnley. And now a few Burnley fans are looking at it thinking we probably should have got Frank Lampard instead of Scott Parker. But obviously we'll see where we end up at the end of the season. I think that debate might sort of like calm down if we manage to get second.
Yeah, it's
Joe,
all about
do you mind me chipping in there? Is there a feeling among Burnley fans? Because on the one hand, you've got this incredible defensive solidity, like 12 straight clean sheets is absolutely phenomenal. 9 goals conceded all season in March is just absolutely insane and unlike anything I've seen before. And that defensive efficiency, you've got to credit Parker for that. On the other hand, there's this feeling that you're maybe not playing the kind of football that some Burnley fans might have wanted, perhaps.
Yeah.
So, what's the feeling in the fan base? Are you willing to sort of tolerate the football being a little bit hit and miss in order to accept the results, or what's the feeling?
Well, if we finish second, it's worth it for me, in my opinion, if we finish second, winning 1-0 and drawing all these 0-0s, it's worth watching the style of football that we are watching at the minute. I can't speak for everybody. I know there's some fans who don't agree with that, and there's some fans that have criticised it. Even when we beat beat Oxford 1-0 at the Turf, there were fans mourning on Twitter. I get that for some fans, it's not their cup of tea. But if, for example, we finish third and we get beat by Coventry over 2 legs in the playoffs, then it's not going to be been worth it, and then there's going to be a lot of fans. For me, I'm more bothered about going up than being entertained. If I'm being honest with you, I know everybody doesn't agree with that, and I will get some stick for that as well. But that's the most important thing: get to the Premier League, and then hopefully we're back there and we can regroup as a Premier League club.
Could you guess a percentage for me then, Joe, in terms of where the fan base is at, in terms of your point of view? And also
it's always difficult, isn't it, to put a number on it, because I feel like there's the minority is always quite loud on Twitter, but I think if you go off Twitter, it's probably like 60-40 positive for Parker. But there's a lot of people. It's growing, to be fair. It depends. Right now, if you go on the Burnley hashtag, nobody's happy. Everyone's in a foul mood because of what happened at the weekend. But if you'd have gone on it after the Sheffield Wednesday win, and the Sheffield Wednesday win as well, by the way, I know we're going to get into Burnley more deeper a little bit, but the second half we were fantastic. We played some great stuff.
Do you know what,
be a
Joe?
sign of things to come.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a Sheffield Wednesday fan here in the office on Monday after that game who said, actually, for an hour, Burnley were dour and they turned it on in the last half an hour.
Yeah.
But then I'd also watched the highlights of that game, and I thought in the second, like you say, second half, some of the football you played, Edwards in particular on the right-hand side with some of the skill that he brings, and Brian Hill are coming off the bench, getting into some great positions. You did actually play some good football, so I suppose optimistically, maybe that can start to flow a bit more in the last quarter of the campaign.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I think so. I think Edwards is the class above. He's kind of like a Lefay. He's coming in. He's too good for the Championship, and I'm hoping that can sort of like spur us on to try and get that second place. But yeah, the second half against Sheffield Wednesday was fantastic. But admittedly, we were quite lucky to go in 1-0 up at half time, and if anything, we should have been 2 or 3-0 down.
I suppose with Parker, it is the result is all that matters, not in terms of a day-to-day result, as in the result of the entire season. I think you're right, Joe. You can put up with defensive-minded football and clean sheets and a few 0-0s if it ends in promotion, whether that's through the playoffs or finishing second. I don't think it particularly matters, but I think Burnley are in a really strong position because of their defence, even if they do end up in the playoffs. Whereas I look at a Sunderland and a Sheffield United, from a Coventry perspective, or a team trying to get in the playoffs, I'd much rather face not Burnley than Burnley at this stage because of your defensive record. I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I hear a lot of fans saying that, but on the flip side, Sheffield United, well, Sunderland especially, would more likely to outscore you than we would. If you do get a goal against us, for example, are we going to come back and win that match? But obviously on the flip side, if we get a goal, chances are we've won the game. And I think when we went 1-0 up against Sheffield Wednesday, that's what the commentary team was saying when I was watching the highlights back. It's like, Burnley have gone 1-0 up, we're going to win this match now. And you do feel that way as a fan. So yeah, it's interesting, but we'll see. Fingers crossed we're not in the playoffs, and we don't have to have the debate of who's playing who. Fingers crossed we finish second, but I'm sure we'll get onto that.
Yeah, Cardiff on Tuesday night. We are recording before that game, and this feels like a very big week for Burnley in terms of those 2 back-to-back games. You're currently 5 points behind Sheffield United. As you mentioned, do you think Leeds are kind of uncatchable now?
Yes, I think the way you worded it in the running order, where I think it says, "Have you given up on the title?" I think that's a bit.
Have you given up on the title? There you go.
It's. I won't say given up, but do I think we will catch Leeds? Probably not. They're a better team than us. They're going to win more games than us between now and the end of the season. Yes, they dropped points against West Brom, but West Brom are no mugs. They're a decent side, so I don't think a draw at home to West Brom's the worst result in the world, especially when you back it up with the 2 previous results. If you'd have asked any Leeds fan, would you take 7 points from Sunderland, Sheffield United and West Brom? Every single one of them would have bit your hand off. So yeah, we might be a little bit closer to them at 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, fingers crossed, after we've beaten Cardiff. But I just think ultimately that the swing that we need to catch Leeds is too much. I feel like they will collect more points between now and the end of the season. And if we do collect more points, there's not going to be a 16-point swing or whatever it is we need. So yeah, I'm just focused now solely on catching Sheffield United in second, which is weird because I know they're debating whether they can catch Leeds and they're not really looking over their shoulders. But we're like, no, catch Sheffield United now, but it has to start on Tuesday night. We can't be drawing any more games now. There can't be any more 0-0s. There's been too many of them.
Gab, how do you see it?
Well, I wanted to ask Joe about, in terms of the automatic promotion race, I still think Burnley have got a great chance of catching Sheffield United. I'm not really buying Sheffield United still, even though, they've been up there all season, so it seems like a bit disrespectful. But, in terms of the nature of their performances in the last 8 games or so, I think they might have won 6 or 7 of them, but never quite convincing. And I think that whereas I'm starting to sort of be won over a bit more by Burnley just because of the consistency of their defensive foundations. But I wanted to ask you, Joe, about James Trafford, because there was a sort of very much a feeling that he wasn't ready for the Premier League last season.
Yeah.
And the chap that had been in goal for you in the title-winning season under Vincent Kompany, I think a lot of people were disappointed that he wasn't staying in the team for that season. But this year it feels like dropping down to the Championship. It's given him the perfect platform just to rebuild his confidence. And it looks like in the Premier League next season, he'll be ready to go and be competing with Jordan Pickford, possibly for the England spot.
Yeah, it's interesting with Trafford. I feel like we've gone sort of like completely changed direction with him. I completely agree. He went too high too soon. He went from Bolton Wanderers in League One, admittedly had a decent season, straight to the Premier League. And he did look like a rabbit caught in headlights, but he was a young goalkeeper. And you've got to remember, we weren't this cautious team that we are now who doesn't concede too many shots. We were this gung-ho team, going hell for leather against the likes of City and Chelsea. He was hung out to dry. He did look like a rabbit caught in headlights, and he made some mistakes. I remember him making the mistake against Luton, although I do still stand by that was a foul. But he shouldn't have come to collect that cross, in my opinion. He should have stayed on his line. He made a mistake at West Ham. And there were just moments like that. And eventually he did get dropped from Juric, and weirdly enough, Juric actually did better but made more mistakes, if that makes sense. Like in the saves, he was making better saves, but then he'd let one roll under his foot, for example. So it was a bit bizarre. We didn't really have a great goalkeeper in the Premier League last season, and that was part of the reason we were relegated. Not the sole reason, that the style of play and the manager being stubborn was other reasons. But yeah, now he's come down to the Championship, and I feel like this is the league that he should have been in last season. When we signed him, we should have loaned him out to a Premier League team, a Championship team, in my opinion. And he's showing that he is now good enough. He's definitely good enough for this league. In my opinion, he's the best goalkeeper in this league. I know some people will say Cooper and things like that. That's fair enough. But I think now when you look at the stats, you can confidently say now as a Burnley fan that Trafford's the best goalkeeper in the league, in my opinion. And he's actually looking like he's enjoying his time at Burnley now. Like I didn't really feel like he wasn't, and why would he in the Premier League? Getting hung out to dry, getting criticised by the fans. But now obviously the fans like me, they've all gone full circle. We all love him. It was even in the stands at Deepdale on Saturday with Jadon Anthony. I'm not sure what he would have made of that performance. I'm not sure if anybody asked him. But yeah, he's gone full circle. He really has, and it's great to see. And whether Burnley are in the Premier League next season or not, James Trafford 100% will be. And obviously, there's talk of him already going to Newcastle. So we'll see what happens. But James Trafford will definitely be a Premier League goalkeeper next season, and he will definitely be England's number one for the foreseeable future. As soon as he overtakes Pickford, Pickford's on his way down. I think now. That's no disrespect to Pickford; it's just an age thing. I think Trafford will overtake him, and he will be the England number one for just as long as Jordan Pickford has been.
How does he compare to like Nick Pope? Because you've had some decent goalkeepers at Burnley
Yeah.
over the years, but how does he compare?
Very different, really. Very different. Nick Pope would catch absolutely everything. If something went into the box, Nick Pope was catching it. It doesn't matter if, Lukaku was in the way or somebody like that. He'd just bulldoze through and catch it and just completely take the pressure off your defence.
It's divine intervention, Jay.
Sorry?
Divine intervention, Jay.
Yeah. Yeah, it always do that, and it just completely take the pressure off the defence. And he's a great shot stopper as well. Is Pope, whereas Trafford's a decent shot stopper. He's not quite as good as Nick Pope, in my opinion. Trafford has got better at collecting crosses this season, to be fair. But let's see what he's like in the Premier League. Obviously, Nick Pope did it consistently in the Premier League for us. Trafford's obviously much better with the ball at his feet. It's kind of like the modern goalkeeper. Like if you look at Nick Pope, he's like probably the goalkeeper from 10, 15 years ago. Great at shot stopping, great at collecting crosses, but not very good with his feet, and you wouldn't really pass it. And the amount of times Pope kicked it out of play, for example, when he was under no pressure at all, that was the only thing that used to annoy Burnley fans. Whereas Trafford's a complete opposite. You can ping a ball to his feet, and he's going to take on an advanced attacker before spraying out a beautiful crossfield pass, for example. And they're two very different goalkeepers, to be fair. But obviously, we've had some great goalkeepers, like you said. Tom Eaton's my personal favourite. Absolutely love the guy. We had Joe Hart as well. He wasn't great for us, to be fair. But obviously, he had a very good career, to be fair to Joe Hart. But yeah, we've been blessed with goalkeepers recently. And even Muric, I know he's not doing well at Ipswich now and didn't do too well for us in the Premier League, but he was fantastic in that championship winning team. So yeah, we have had a lot of good goalkeepers down the years, and even going back to the 90s, like Chris Pearce, Marlon Beresford. Obviously, them lot will be over your head, but yeah, we've had some really good goalkeepers.
Can't believe Joe Hart played for Burnley, Gab. We completely forgot about that.
Joe, I wanted to ask you about the centre forward position at Burnley because first half of the season, often you started Jay Rodriguez up top, and he's gone to Wrexham in January. You've got Lyle Foster there, but I'm just wondering, like, whether or not you go up to the Premier League. I know we can talk about Burnley, whether they've created enough chances this season, but whether you need that sort of killer centre forward that's quick and strong, and you can back him to put away those chances, and might only need one to score the winner. That feels like quite an important area for Burnley to look at, whether on whichever division you're in next season.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're missing. Lyle Foster's a strange one, obviously. You mentioned there we started Jay Rodriguez quite a lot at the start of the season. Lyle Foster picked up an injury, so that was the reason why Jay was starting. Then obviously we bring Ashley Barnes back randomly out of nowhere, and then Jay leaves. Obviously we all love Ashley Barnes, but it's fair to say he's over the hill now. But with Lyle Foster, it's weird. Like, we know he's had his mental health troubles and stuff, and missed a large part of the Premier League campaign last season. Went back to South Africa, which is obviously where he's from. So I always feel like I have to caveat any criticism by saying, like, look, I understand he's had a hard time and stuff, but I think for me now, the patience is running out with Lyle Foster. I've sat on the podcast many times and said we need to back him, start him in the number 9, because Parker likes to play him on the left side forward position, which isn't his bag at all. And I want to see more of Lyle in the 9 with maybe like a Brownhill or a Fleming in the 10. But for some reason, Parker likes to play Foster on like I said, the wide forward left. It's not wing, but it's kind of like the left-hand side of the front forward, if you will. And then Fleming in the 9, and then Brownhill in the 10. And it just kind of all feels like square pegs, round holes. But then Lyle's had a couple of chances now where, like, he played, for example, at Preston at the weekend, and he offered absolutely nothing. He wasn't making the runs. He wasn't stretching play. He didn't get any service, admittedly. But I just feel like patience is running thin now with Lyle. It's bizarre because I do feel like he suits the Premier League more than the Championship. He will, when Premier League defences, they tend to play a lot higher. Like, the amount of teams that have come to the turf and just sat back, that's not Lyle's game at all. Lyle's very good running in behind defences, playing off the shoulder, getting in behind, and then finishing. What I used to say last year, if Lyle Foster goes through on goal, you can put your house on him scoring it on a one-on-one situation, because he did it at Luton, he did it at Villa. He was fantastic in a few games in the Premier League last season, but you just feel like he's not doing it enough. And I feel like now patience is starting to run thin with Burnley fans. And yeah, no matter what league we're in next year, we need a new striker.
Yeah, and also I think you brought in Andreas Haintonji, who you're hoping would be that sort of physical beast, runs in behind and grabs the goals. But it hasn't quite worked well. Either Parker hasn't fancied him, or not sure whether there's injuries, but that hasn't worked out as you'd have hoped. So yeah, I can see
Haintonji's not even here anymore. He's been sent out on loan, so that just shows how much the club rated him. And he didn't, admittedly, he didn't look great in his cameos. But to be fair, I feel like he didn't really get enough of a chance. But it looked like a big physical player who was powerful, but then probably struggled to trap a bag of cement. It were a little bit of a bizarre one with Haintonji. And yeah, to be honest, mate, I completely forgot about him because we sent him out on loan pretty swiftly, I think, as soon as the first chance came. So that just shows how much he's rated by Parker.
Joe, do you see any strikers in the Championship that you fancy at the minute that could possibly make the step up? I know it's not Burnley's usual kind of shopping market, but if you do get to the Premier League, do you see any Championship strikers you might fancy?
I feel like the world of football doesn't have like a proper number 9 so much these days. I feel like that is an area like the striker's dying. Like the really good striker is dying. I feel. Obviously you've got some good ones. Things like that probably could make the step. I wanted us to sign Conway, if I'm being honest with you. I don't mind him. I don't mind Diaz as well, which is he's weird as Diaz because he tends to pick up a few goals here and there, but doesn't really I've never seen him do it against us. He doesn't do it on a consistent basis enough for me.
He's
Apart
an
from his
inside
spell where he
forward,
did
though,
quite
for
well at
me,
Blackburn.
Joe.
Is he?
Sorry,
Fair
Joe.
enough. Yeah.
I don't think he's an out-and-out centre forward, though,
Yeah,
Diaz.
see what
I think he's...
I was going to say, this is what I mean, that there's not that many there anymore. I would have liked Latte Laff as well, but obviously I think he's gone to the MLS. I think with Burnley, that's what we tend to do now. We tend to shop in the European market. So if we do go up and we bring a striker in, it'll be someone from the Belgian league or something like that. It won't be from the Championship. I feel like when we were, back in like 2016, we were signing players, like Andre Gray. We would go to the Championship and sign. I think we signed like the leading goal scorer in the Championship 3 years in a row. Mate Vidra, Andre Gray, and Chris Wood, if I remember rightly. And I just feel like them sort of players now, that they're not out of our price range as such, but they tend to go to like, more established Premier League clubs rather than a club that's just gone up. So yeah, it'll be difficult. There's a couple of strikers in the Championship that I do fancy, but yeah, I doubt we'd be going in that market. Like you said, it's not our shopping market.
Do you agree with that as a recruitment policy for Burnley? Because on the one hand, going into Europe, you've got much greater opportunity to develop players and sell them on at a big profit if it goes well. However, if you look at the most successful era of Burnley's recent history in terms of continuity under Sean Dyche, it did tend to be very much a domestic policy.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I feel like there should be a mix rather than just going into the European market or just going into the Championship market, because you do tend to pay a lot more for players from the Championship, whereas you could, like you said already, you can pick these bargains up and sell them on for a lot of money if you go into Europe. I feel like there should be a mix. I feel like recruitment's moved on a lot more these days. It's all stat based. Like Burnley do like a lot of documentary stuff now, and they show the recruitment team sort of like looking at stats and stuff on a screen rather than going and watching games. Obviously they will go and watch games as well, but I feel like recruitment is,
Joe, I think.
Yeah, you do, and that's what I mean. I feel like you need a balance in terms of the Championship market and the European market. But you're right though, because there's been some absolute gems that we've found. Like, all right, Zarori played very well for 8 months and then did fade away, to be fair. But then obviously you've got Benson and players like that who look absolutely brilliant. But then you've also got, the likes of Trezor and Horn-Tondre that, Trezor might have it in his locker, but he doesn't want to show it. And then Horn-Tondre, don't think he really had it. So yeah, the swings and roundabouts, some have worked out, some haven't. And I feel like there could be a better balance, if I'm honest.
Just to add to that as well, I also feel like the quantity of players is massive. Like, if you look at the squad list going into the season, I think you had something like 40 players there. And granted, you did sell a lot of players in August, so that would have reduced it a little bit. But it does feel like Burnley kind of go for quite a scattergun recruitment policy in terms of signing loads of players from across Europe. And in some ways, sometimes it's hard to actually really home in on a selection of those players. So maybe actually investing a bit more in the right player and maybe not going for quite so many, perhaps.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know if it's a Burnley recruitment policy or it was a company recruitment policy, but certainly under Vincent Kompany, it felt like there was the high turnover of players was too much. Like, we went up to the Premier League, and I know we had a lot of loan players, fair enough, but I feel like we should have concentrated on getting Nathan Teller. I feel like if we'd have had Nathan Teller, it might have been a little bit different. He was superb in that Championship season, by far and away the best player in the league, in my opinion. I know, to be fair, Josh Cullen won the Player of the Season, obviously, also at Burnley, but Nathan Teller was superb, and I just feel like we made a lot of mistakes that summer. We didn't need such a high turnover of players. Then we get relegated again. There's another high turnover of players, and I feel like if we don't go up this season now, a lot of players will leave. Trafford will leave, Esteve will leave, CJ Riley will leave, Brownell's out of contract, Connor Roberts looks like he's going back to Swansea, he's out of contract. So I am a little bit worried that it's going to be another kind of like scattergun approach. So yeah, I'm hoping that if we do have another exodus, then we do it a little bit more reserved and not go completely scattergun and just basically do what you said, concentrate more on getting a lower quality player in rather than a lot of players.
Agree with that.
How much would you charge for Maxime Esteve then, Joe? In let's say 2 scenarios: one that you stay in the Championship and one that you get promoted.
It's difficult. I feel like minimum 25. He is so good. That might be ambitious. I don't feel like the scenarios should change it too much, but I know that they do. I feel like as a Premier League club, you can demand more. But I feel like his experience should be what you're looking at, and how good he is. And I feel like we should be getting 25 absolute minimum. I know there's been rumours that Everton are looking at him. If Branthwaite leaves, I feel like he can make that step up. Admittedly, I'm not going to sit here and say he's as good as Branthwaite. Branthwaite's absolutely fantastic, but I feel like he is obviously I've watched Tarkowski and Ben Mee for years, and now I'm having the joy of watching Maxime Esteban. He's cut from the same cloth. He really is fantastic. Some Burnley fans even think he's even better than the likes of Tarkowski and Ben Mee. I think that's a little bit premature just yet, but I think he goes on to have better careers than them two. He's absolutely fantastic. And I think, minimum 25 million, pushing 30 if we get a bidding war, but maybe I'm being a bit greedy there.
I've got an interesting question for you, Joe, as well. From now until the end of the season, kind of, if you had to go without one player from now until the end of the season, which player would have the biggest impact? Which player's absence would have the biggest impact? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think it's Esteve, if I'm honest with you. Okay. It could be CJ as well, because Esteve did play against Preston. And to be fair to Osmajic, even after everything that's gone on and stuff, I feel like he bullied him. I genuinely feel like he bullied him. I feel like that's the first time I've looked at Esteve and thought, not having a great game today, to be fair. Maybe Egan Riley and Trafford as well. Any of them three will probably have a very similar impact, because they are big misses if we miss them. I feel like not a lot's being said as well about Humphreys being missing at the minute now as well, because obviously Humphreys left back is out now, and I'll be honest with you, Perez doesn't look up to that standard or anywhere near that standard, if I'm being honest with you. And I feel like against Sheffield Wednesday, a lot of their attacks came down from the Perez side, and they were getting crosses in, and they should have scored at least one of them, like I said earlier. So I am a little bit worried about that, but I'd probably go one of the two centre-backs. So because Humphreys was playing left back, weirdly enough, but he was also our centre back cover. So now, if Esteve or CJ Egan Riley get injured, we have Joe Worrell going in there, and I thought he would have been okay. But again, he was absolutely awful against Preston, if I'm going to be honest with you. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried now. So it probably will be one of the centre backs.
Interesting stuff. I know you kind of touched on it earlier, but if Burnley do end up in the playoffs, which teams are you most worried about?
Coventry at the minute, because of the form that they're in. I feel like Lampard's playing some fantastic stuff. Got Coventry playing some fantastic stuff. Maybe they've peaked too soon, though, and they'll start to come down a little bit. I do feel like you will get the playoffs, though. I do feel like Coventry do get the playoffs, but maybe come May, you may not be in as good a form. But I think Lampard's had a massive impact, and he's shown that he can win games, and that's a worry. And the best team I've seen this season, it live at Turf Moor, was Sunderland. I know they didn't beat us. Well, nobody's beaten us at Turf Moor, but they were absolutely superb. Obviously, Bellingham, he gets some stick, Bellingham, because of his brother. So people saying he's only rated because of his brother. Absolute nonsense. He is superb. He ran that show against us. You've got to remember, he's a young kid playing against the likes of Josh Cullen and Josh Brownhill. He was fantastic. Chris Rigg as well. They were superb, Sunderland. We haven't scored against Sunderland this season. They've obviously, over the course of the season, they beat us up at the Stadium of Light. I was there that day as well. They pressed us brilliantly that day. Admittedly, there's a lot of mitigating circumstances around that match. We were selling everybody and we couldn't put a full team out, but they were superb nonetheless. You can only play what's put in front of you. So at the minute, it's Coventry and Sunderland. I'd put them just level. But then somebody's going to go on a run and sneak into it and go into it in May full of confidence. And at the minute, I'm looking like that might be Middlesbrough. But again, that's another team we've not beaten yet this season. So yeah, it's going to be tough. If we do end up in the playoffs, it's going to be tough. But yeah, I think like you said earlier, Simon, there's a lot of teams that we're looking at Burnley thinking, I don't particularly want to play them as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. Gut feeling from both of you. Right now, as we speak, in early March, how does Burnley's season end? Gab, you go first.
Second place.
Oh,
I think they catch Sheffield United. Yeah, I do.
Do you? Okay. What about you, Joe?
I was a Burnley doubter earlier in the season. I was a skeptic. I was a data nerd. I thought they would drop off because they weren't creating enough chances, but they've done it consistently for so long that you just can't help but buy into it.
Does that mean you think Sunderland aren't going to quite make it, or they're going to finish fourth?
Oh, Sunderland aren't getting autos now. I think the gap's too big. I think Burnley are the only ones who could catch Sheffield United. I think Leeds will win the league. But yeah, I'm just backing Burnley to clean sheet themselves into the top two, and I think Sheffield United might have to settle for the playoffs.
Okay, what about you, Joe?
Yeah, it feels weird saying this after how annoyed I was with the weekend's performance, but let's remember we made 9 changes. I got a lot of stick for constantly saying B team on Twitter this weekend, but we made 9 changes, so it's a fact. But yeah, I agree with Gab. It's weird, like Gab's gone full circle with Burnley and obviously wasn't a fan earlier in the season, and now he's respecting what we're doing. I'm the same with Sheffield United. I sat in that room where Gab is now and said, I think Sheffield United will win the league. I like the fact that they're just not putting in good performances, but they're winning games. And I felt like at the time they would start playing well and getting better and then get even better. But they're still just playing poorly and winning games. And like Gab said earlier, yes, it's March. And to be fair, the fact that they're still in the conversation when I don't feel like they've played well for a very long time just shows how good they probably actually are. But I don't know. I'll look at them now and constantly think, how are they still second? It's annoying me. But to be fair, they got a good win at the weekend. I was looking at the QPR game thinking potential banana skin here, Sheffield United, they might slip up. And again, they did another number on them, just like they did to Luton not so long ago. But yeah, I've gone full circle with them. I don't rate them too much at the minute. I feel like we get second, but I feel like we need them to slip up. Like I said earlier, they've got to go to Hillsborough yet, and I'm thinking that's going to be where they slip up. Obviously, we've got to go to Coventry, so I feel like that could be somewhere where we slip up. But yeah, obviously we've still got to play Sheffield United yet, so it's in a weird way, it's in our own hands. Because if we win every single game between now and the end of the season, yes, I know it's not going to happen, but if we did, then we will 100% be second, because Sheffield United is one of the games that we have to play. But obviously they can say the exact same thing. What I will say is we need to be above Sheffield United on the final day of the season if we are going to go up. Because on the final day of the season, we play Millwall at home, winnable game, but they've beaten us once already this season. Sheffield United play Blackburn Rovers at home, and I don't feel like Blackburn Rovers will still be in the playoff mixture. They will 100% throw that game, and they will 100% lose that game. Sheffield United will definitely win, so we need to be above them on that final day. Because if we're below them and we need Blackburn to do us a favour, it's not going to happen.
Conspiracy theories galore already. How many months before the end of the season are we? Thank you very much, Joe, for that insight into Burnley. And Gab, now it's over to you for your weekly corner of concern. Who are you worried about in the Championship this
week? A little bit worried about Oxford. I know they've still got a fairly comfortable cushion over the bottom 3 in the Championship, which is testament to the unbeaten run that Gary Rowett oversaw when he first took charge at the turn of the year. But what I'm a little bit worried about is that Oxford United have been very reliant on their home form this season, and each of the remaining visitors to the Kassam Stadium are all in the promotion mix one way or another. And that's a bit of a concern for me in terms of, are they going to be able to tick off the points that they normally have been able to at home? Again, a 3-2 defeat to Coventry at the weekend. Their home form has dropped off a little bit recently. So I think they've still got a little bit of work to do. So that's my concern for Oxford United. Normally, I'm very confident in Gary Rowett in terms of his ability to stabilise things. And it's not like, other than the Coventry game, they've been conceding a ton of goals, but they had also lost that maybe instinct for scoring goals. They could create some chance in the second half of the 2-0 defeat to Portsmouth a couple of weeks ago that maybe could have been put away, but they're missing that little bit of confidence in front of goal. So yeah, I've got some concerns about Oxford United. I think it could be an awkward end to the season for them if one of Luton, Plymouth Argyle or Derby can string some form together.
Yeah, interesting. They were really struggling in front of goal lately, and then at the weekend they were quite a good attacking team. So it's like they're struggling to find that balance almost at the moment. You've also got your Championship treble for us for this weekend. Is that right?
Yes, I think Burnley will beat Luton this weekend just because it's back to James Trafford in goal. Not conceded in 1,090 minutes of football, closing in on Edwin van der Sar's record from the 08-09 season. I think Sheffield United beat Preston North End, and I think Sunderland will beat Cardiff.
Brilliant stuff. We'll get that on Betfred and priced up for you if you want to check it out. We should probably do a bit of a score prediction and preview for the Luton-Burnley game, or Burnley-Luton. Joe, you said you were kind of confident ahead of this one. Do you think you're going to come out with another win and another clean sheet?
Yeah, I do. The team, obviously, we have to play Cardiff as well before then, but the team will be back to the league team. The 9 changes that we made against Preston will be reversed and will all come back in, and I feel like we are strong enough to beat Cardiff and Luton. Yes, this could be going out after the Cardiff game, I think, where I look very, very silly. But we should have enough to beat both of them. We should have enough now to get 6 points in the next 2 games. And like I said earlier, draws aren't enough. And I feel like if, say, like it's 0-0 in the 80th minute, I feel like we will go for it. Whereas before, I feel like Parker's been a little bit too cautious and he'd rather not lose. Whereas I feel like now we will go for it if time's ticking on. And when we have players like Edwards and the like in the team now, I feel like we should have enough to unlock these defences.
Brilliant. Can I get a score prediction from you for Luton?
2-0.
I was going to say 2-0. I'm going to say 2-0 as well. What about you,
I
Gab?
was going to say 2-0 as well.
There you go. That's going to be 2-0. When it's 2-0, we can clip that up and like, this is why we get these guys on the show.
2-0 to Luton it'll be now, won't it? And we'll all look very, very
probably,
silly. Brilliant stuff. And I've got an engaging question to end with here for both of you. If you had to pick just one Championship player to be cloned and make up an entire 11 out of just that one player, who would you pick and why? So someone who could play in every position, do a decent job at both ends, and win the league as just one player. Gab?
Ethan Ampadu of Leeds United.
Oh, it's a good shout.
Because I think he's such a versatile footballer. He's one of the better centre-halves in the Championship and he's one of the best midfielders. I think it's his dynamism that I've seen right from his days as 16-year-old with Exeter City. Very dynamic, energetic footballer. I think he could pop up into any role and make some sort of difference. So, Ethan Ampadu for me.
What about you, Joe? I'm
going to keep it Burnley. And I'm going to say Josh Cullen. He's the type of player that you want. Chris, who I have on my podcast, he summed it up perfectly. So if you're in the trenches and you looked next to you and you saw Josh Cullen, you'd be buzzing. You'd be like, right, this guy's going to give his all. He might not, say, for example, he might not be a great striker if you had to play him as striker, but you know for a fact he wears his heart on his sleeve and he's going to absolutely give you everything in that team. So, yeah, for me, if I had to pick anyone from the Burnley team, it'd be Josh Cullen.
He looks after the ball as well, doesn't he, Joe?
He really does. And we missed him so much on Saturday. Like, he breaks play up, he looks after it, he retains possession, and he gets it out to the more creative players. That's what I mean. Probably not the best in terms of 11 in every single pitch. He's not going to create you much. But if you want somebody next to you and you want somebody, say as a defensive midfielder, if you're looking next to you and you've got John Joe Shelby after his performance at the weekend, you'd be a little bit frustrated. But if you're looking next to you and you're seeing Josh Cullen, you'd be absolutely over the moon. So yeah, for me, I'm going to keep it Burnley and go with Josh Cullen.
Excellent stuff. I had two names for this one, and Gab, I was so certain you were going to say Joe Bellingham that I wasn't going to say him because I think he's obviously all-round magnificent footballer, could cover every blade of grass quite easily. The other name I'd throw in there is Jack Rodoni because he's got an incredible amount of assists. He's 6'1", I think. He's scored an incredible number of headers. I think he'd be all right everywhere, and he's got quality to look after the ball.
Do you know what, Simon? I think he's got enough energy that he could probably cover all 11 positions on his own.
Perfect stuff. A cheesy Gab joke to finish. What else do we want on this show? Make sure you like and subscribe to The Sportsman Untitled. Some of the stats saying 90% of viewers aren't subscribed, so please do subscribe if you made it this far. It really helps us out. Gab, thank you as always for joining us. I'll see you next week. Joe, thank you very much. Let's hope Burnley have a good winning run from now until the end of the season. But that is it for this week's edition of The Sportsman Untitled, and we'll see you next time.